I'm Brenda Watson, and I'm here today to talk about my history in the natural products industry and also really my history in, I could say, natural health, because I've had more of a career too, other than just, having a natural supplement company. I started way back, and many people go, what in the world made you think about going into colon health? Well, it is quite a story. In my childhood, I was born in the early 50s, and in my childhood back then, we were really into the antibiotic revolution. I mean, antibiotics were they weren't new, but they were being given out more freely than today. We've got a little bit more concern about it. However, as a young child, I had a lot of sore throats and earaches, and so there was no thought about giving me rounds and rounds and rounds of antibiotics even before I started elementary school. So when I started in elementary school, even though I had had sore throats and earaches, then I started to get more health problems, migraine headaches, my hair fell out. I had to use steroid shots in my head to try to get my hair to grow back. And so that went on like all through, middle school, high school. I had chronic fatigue syndrome and hormonal issues very young. So that went on and on and on. And, I followed the traditional path like most people do, go to the doctor, get another round of antibiotics or whatever. And so finally, about my late 20s, I started to wake up a little bit, and I thought, wow, this isn't working for me anymore. And this was about getting into the middle 80s. Now, you have to understand the middle 80s, I walked into a health food store, which they weren't everywhere like they are today. I walked into a health food store and I said, you know what? There's got to be a better way. I am doing what I think is the right thing, but I'm not getting any better. I still have migraine headaches and on and on and on. So I walked in there and I said, I need help, and here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to read. Now, I'm an avid reader, so I want to read and I want to learn what's out there, because I really feel like a diet, lifestyle change. What do you do to start changing your health? Well, I didn't know anything about gut health, and I didn't really realize that the core really of my problem was I was constipated. I mean, that was the core issue, even though, it had overflowed into other issues. So back in the mid-80s, I walked into a health food store and said, I'm gonna change my life, and that's what I did. So back in that day, there was like Dr. Bernard Jensen. Many people don't even know who that is today, and I know the younger people don't, because I talk to them and go, oh yeah, I studied with Dr. Bernard Jensen, and they go, who? Well, of course, he's passed away by now, but he's the one that really started us into understanding cleansing of the colon, gut health, and that type of thing, even though back in those days, it still was not considered something pleasant to talk about. So I decided, I had spent a couple of years working on myself, personally doing, colon cleansing, changing my diet, trying to learn new things. And remember, because we're going to talk about probiotics, remember probiotics weren't even a word back then. So that wasn't even a word. So after a couple of years of doing that for me, I said, you know what? This is so interesting to me, and I love it so much. What has happened to me to change my life, I want to go to school and relearn nutrition and teach it to people. I didn't know how it was going to turn out. And this is something I want to say to younger people too. People always thought, oh, Brenda, you must have had this vision. I sort of did, but not really. I just sort of followed the bouncing ball every day. So I live in Florida now. I'm originally from North Carolina. That's where you hear the accent. But I live in Florida, and I lived in Florida then. So state to state, there's different regulations on nutrition and different things. So I went back to school in the late 80s and began to learn nutrition, acupressure, colonics, detoxification, massage therapy, acupuncture. I mean, I was a student, and I loved it. And so I was very fortunate to walk into a colon therapy clinic one day in my area and say, you know what, I want to get a colonic because I want to see how this works for me. So anyway, the beautiful thing about that was the lady who was the teacher there and the therapist there had been doing this since the 70s, right? So I'm with a really old timer, a beautiful woman, but an old timer into colon health. So I went in there and I started doing it for myself, and I thought, you know what, I'm learning this. And what happens, folks, is when you're on the right path, the universe opens up the opportunities. They just come to you. So this lady said, Brenda, let me mentor you. Why don't you come in here and work, and I can work you through an apprenticeship program, and you can be licensed in the state of Florida. And I said, okay. And she was really strict. I mean, I didn't touch a person for a year. I observed. I went to herbal school and learned herbology. And so I just followed her around and listened, and I helped because we were doing detoxification programs like, remember the old steam cabinets that you see on the black and white TV where your head sticks out and the towels around it? Well, that's the way we detoxified people, was with steam cabinets, so we already knew we were getting toxins out of the skin as well as the colon and other areas of the body. So we wrapped people in clay, and so that we could get more toxins out of the skin. And so I worked in the clinic and I loved it. And I went to herbal school and learned how to formulate herbs. So I was going through a really opening in my life of learning. And so after that, after a couple of years, I thought, you know what? I'm going to start training therapists and opening my own clinics. And that's what I did. So the state of Florida certified me to teach anatomy, physiology, and then I could get therapist certified. And as I sort of reacquainted myself with people in terms of people who wanted to get into the natural health industry, if someone was really interested and I felt passionate, I would train them. And I opened in the early 90s 5 natural health clinics in the central part of Florida. So Sarasota, Clearwater, Palm Harbor, those are the areas I was in. So I trained these ladies and we opened these clinics and we helped so many people, and I was able to teach them, and I also had my own clientele. And this is kind of the message I want to give you. It's really hard work, okay? This is not something, if you really love this, then you have to take it seriously. And it's really just, you learn from the people that you work on. You know, that's who my teachers were. A lot of my teachers came from that. So anyway, I started to do that and have 5 natural health clinics. The beauty of it is in the early 90s, we were just seeing this transition of MDs who were going holistic. And so Florida was sort of a plethora of those kinds of doctors. And so I was fortunate that in every clinic I opened, I had a doctor associated with it. So they taught me too how to read blood work, how to help all these people. And so I had these 5 natural health clinics. And like I said, when the universe opens up, people come to you that you would never think, and you have these moments. So here I am working in a clinic, and I'm helping people with a lot of herbs as well as colonics and acupuncture and detox. And I'm at a trade show, and a gentleman comes up to me, and he says, Brenda, why don't you start developing your own products for your clients? And I went, oh, no. I can't do that. I don't have the money. I can't run thousands of bottles of product for my 5 health clinics. That's just not possible. And he said, you know what I'll do? I'll run very small runs for you. And you can use those on your clients and see how it works out, and we'll start very slow. And that was how I got started with this same person that's still with me today. So I started formulating products for the clients in the clinic. And then as time went on, my husband, and then we're getting now into about the mid-90s, and my husband comes to me and he says, you need to start putting these products in health food stores. And I went, oh, no way, no way. I am not a public speaker, okay? I am not getting out. So I went around to some of the stores to talk to them, and they're like, could you please come and do lectures for our customers on colon health? And this is in the mid-90s. I'm like, no, I am not gonna stand in front of people and talk about bowel health and constipation, right? No. And so the other thing is, you call your parents up and you go, Mom and Dad from North Carolina, I have this new career in colon health, and all these things are happening, and they're like, are you crazy? I mean, seriously? You're gonna talk about constipation to the public? My dad was horrified. However, it turned out very well, as you know. So what happens is he starts formulating products. I start going around in Florida to teach the customers of health food stores about cleansing. And then in 1996, I put my first product on the shelf of a health food store to sell to consumers. And that was the beginning of the company called Renew Life. And Renew Life started in 1996. Now remember, I said probiotics. We knew that there was good bacteria in the digestive system, but we had no clue about anything about that at this point in time. We called everything acidophilus, everything. So we didn't even have the word probiotic. In 1998, I formulated my first probiotic, and it was such a hit. And still we weren't calling it probiotics. We were still calling it acidophilus. So that was in about 1998. So in 1999, now I've been trekking across the United States at this point, putting our products in health food stores, lecturing to consumers. I was on the road, and I want people to know this, you younger people coming into the industry, because again, it's a lot of hard work. So what I was doing is I'd go into a store, put the products in the store, then come back and do a lecture, because you got to sell the product through. You can't just sit it on the shelf and think that everybody's going to walk up and purchase it. That's just not what happens. So anyway, I started doing that, and for 17 years, I went all across the United States and Canada, and I know everybody in every store because I did that 1 week on, 1 week off, 1 week on. So then the business, of course, grew. Now, in the late 1999s, early 2000s, I had this specific lecture that I did, and part of it was on, you hear today people talking about leaky gut and all of these issues. I did my first leaky gut lecture in '96. So I've been doing this a long, long time. So I decided, okay, I'm doing this lecture, and over and over and over again. And so people would raise their hand in the audience and go, why don't you write a book? And I was like, oh, write a book. Yeah, I had a lecture that was a book, that I had developed over, redoing it and redoing it and redoing it. So in 2000, I put together the book called Renew Your Life. And I did it with a GI doctor who happened to be holistic. And I loved him. We kicked it off the moment we got together. So we put out the book, Renew Your Life, which was the whole story about digestion, what is a healthy digestive system, how does it become dysfunctional, what is leaky gut and candida, what are parasites, and then how do we clean it up, how do we clean the gut up. And so this is around the early 2000s. So as time goes on, and I still continue to do the same thing over and over again, we decide in 2004, I'm going to approach PBS about a show. So I'm in Tampa Bay, and so I go over to my local PBS station, and I start talking to the manager there at the station. I said, I want to come out with a show on gut health. And he laughed at me. He said, first of all, you're not going to say the word gut on TV. And I went, what? He said, no, we cannot say the word gut on TV. It's too vulgar. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, we can say something else. Maybe we say digestive health. Let's do that. So now I've got my second book called Gut Solutions. Now, Gut Solutions is a reference book of all these digestive problems. And Dr. Smith co-authored that with me also. So we wrote that together. So that's what I took to PBS. And that was the start of something very great for me in being able to do PBS shows. And so it spread the word across not only the United States, but Canada, because you got to understand, most people in Canada live along the border. And so they pick up PBS from, Buffalo and Detroit and, Seattle and places like that. So not only did it expand me into all over North America, then I started looking at other information that I could come across with on PBS and other shows and other books I could write. And so that started in 2004. Finally, I got this producer to go into PBS with me and help me because they thought I was crazy. And I said, look, let's not call it gut health. Let's call it something that's different. And I had come up with this acronym whenever I did the Gut Solutions book called the HOPE formula. Now the HOPE formula, Dr. Smith and I are sitting there one day writing this book, Gut Solutions, and I said, and I'm doing the remedies for each condition, whether it was constipation, IBS, and I'm doing the remedies for it, the natural remedies. And I said, you know what, Dr. Smith, I keep writing the same thing over and over and over again for each condition. Okay, high fiber is the H, omega-3 is the O, then we did have the word probiotics was the P, and enzymes was the E. So in that, we came up with the HOPE formula. Now the HOPE formula, folks, is basic foundational digestive health. And many times people don't think of something like omega-3s as being part of gut health, but it's a very big part of it. So then I had the first show called the HOPE formula. I didn't say the word gut at all on the show. I said, no gut, I promise I won't say it. However, the other thing they said to me, and I want this for all women out there, they looked at me and said, well, the other problem we have is we just haven't had any successful women do these shows. Well, do you know how that made my hair stand on end? I was like, seriously? We've had no successful women doing this? I can be successful. Now, I am a very visual teacher, so I already had all of these tools to teach people. The graphics on leaky gut. So we made sure that when we did the first show that we were heavy on graphics, because I do believe a picture's worth 1,000 words. And so that's the reason why the HOPE formula was one of the most successful PBS shows that had ever happened. And so that was the beginning. And then we went on to other shows along the way. We had the detox strategy, the Fiber 35 diet, Heart of Perfect Health, Road to Perfect Health, Skinny Gut Diet, all of these shows over a period of, I guess from 2004 all the way up to 2014. So it was quite a career in PBS. And so I became very well known. And of course, probiotics then was starting to grow. So in 2004 was the beginning of the study of the microbiome, okay? Now the National Institutes of Health was gonna fund the study of the microbiome. And so what they do is they give all of these universities that have microbiologists, and they're all looking for money, right? Because they wanna grow and they wanna do clinical studies, but it costs a lot of money. So the National Institutes of Health started to fund these microbiologists to be able to study the microbiome. And so that was really what kept me excited, because new information was coming out every year. It was getting better and better and better what we learned about good bacteria, bad bacteria, and all of those things. And so I carried that along with me with the PBS shows, all the information we were learning. I want to explain something to you about the microbiome. You have to understand that I kind of look at before 2003 and 4, kind of in a way, we didn't have a lot of scientific validation on what was in the gut. So when the NIH that I talked about started funding the university microbiologists to study the bacteria in the gut, we didn't call it anything. We called it good and bad bacteria. So what happened is, as they began to study this, these microbiologists, they named it the microbiome. Now, what does that mean? It means that inside of your digestive system, you have approximately the weight of a brick. Think about that, 3 to 4 pounds of bacteria that range from good to neutral to bad. And that is what's called today your microbiome. And that came about due to the fact that we now, starting it back then, we're starting to study it. How does it relate to allergies, or how does it relate to weight, or how does it relate to, your overall health? And this was when science began to really speed along, because we've got the focus there, and it's been such a mystery. Because back when I used to tell people, well, you've got leaky gut, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, they would go and tell their traditional doctor that and come back to me and said, he said you're crazy, that there's no semi-permeable gut lining, that's just not true. There's no such thing as leaky gut. And so today, I bet you don't go on Facebook or Instagram or anywhere and you don't see that word, and you don't see people who are using that word very frequently. So that's how this microbiome project began to help us. And believe me, I have followed it, because for whatever reason with me, I am so interested in it, and I love the elevation of the science in it, because then I can teach more. I can teach more to people, and we learn more and more as time goes on. So in this complex microbiome, I begin to interview these scientists, and then I begin to learn more and more and more. I did a 10-segment series for PBS called Natural Health Breakthroughs with Brenda Watson. Now, this wasn't a pledge drive where I sold books and DVDs and things. This was a 30-minute segment on a subject. So I looked at fecal transplants, which is very interesting. I talked to genetic doctors who were doing some genetic work with allergies in children. I mean, I went all over to MIT, to Yale, to Colorado State, to UCLA, where they were doing the gut-brain connection work. And so it was just amazing to me how fast we were moving and learning about the bacteria and how the bacteria helps you in your overall health. And so what happened is, in 2015, I had just finished the Skinny Gut Diet book, and I had taken 10 people and put them through a weight loss program for almost 8 months. And I had them with me every week, and we went through and we did stool testing. That's another thing I had been doing for years, was stool analysis. So what I would do is I gave them a baseline of stool test, and then I would show over time, by changing their diet and taking probiotics, we were able to get them to lose weight. And so that was around 2014, and then the Skinny Gut Diet came out in 2015. Unfortunately, in 2015, I had a couple of things happen. I had a personal tragedy. I had some things happen in my life that were dramatic, and I really had to take a break. I just had to take a break from work. At this point in time, Renew Life is a very big company, a lot of stress, even though I love the creation of things. So it was some time to say, okay, I'm backing up. So we brought in a management team. I backed off, and over time, I just needed more time. So they came to me and said, you know what? It's time for you to let go of this, and because you don't know what you're gonna do. And I didn't know that I would come back into the industry. And so I let go of the Renew Life, and I took some time for me. Let me explain something too. You can't help others unless you're healthy, okay? You can't give people advice unless you walk the walk. And that was very important for me. Even though I had always eaten healthy, I emotionally was not there to give myself to people at that time. So about a year ago, last year, my husband came to me and he said, you really need to go back to work. And I'm like, okay, all right. Because, you know, I'm also doing soul searching, and I'm going back and saying, when were you happy? Well, I was always happiest when I was helping other people, always. And so we had already started Vital Planet, And in Vital Planet at that time, we had pet products, dogs and cats, which I'm an animal lover too. You know, I love dogs and cats. I love all animals. And so we had started the Vital Planet Pets, and we were doing quite well. We were selling into health food stores, and I was helping as much as I could at that time. And then what happened is, last year in 2018, in the middle of the year, I said, you know what? There's enough new science out there that I want to bring about a new probiotic product that's different. It's not a me too, it's different than anything on the shelf, and it incorporates the new science that's out there. And so that's what I did. We began formulating in the middle of last year, and we rolled out our new probiotic line called Vital Flora in January of this year, in 2019. And so that's where we are now. I am now back out with the customers of health food stores, educating. I'm here at the trade show, educating and doing lectures, and that's when I'm happiest. I'm happiest in helping other people have better health, because this is what I've really found out, and I think it's the bottom line of everything. If you don't have health, you have nothing. You can have all the money in the world, the things in the world, but when you don't feel good, and believe me, I talk to people every day that do not feel good, right? And if you don't feel good, whether it's chronic fatigue or you got, GI problems or whatever it is, everybody's different, you don't have a life, So I want you to know that's the most important thing that I've learned. And the other important thing I've learned, I call it the GPS, the gut protection system, is the core of your health. And that's because the bacteria in your gut has radar, and it's sensing everything going on in your immune system all the time. So the most important lesson out there is the fact that in order to feel good, you must address your gut. Whether or not you've got a skin problem like eczema or arthritis or heart disease, it started in your gut. And that is my main message. So go back to the gut, even though you may not be having a GI problem, go back to the gut and start with probiotics and start with getting your gut healthy, and over time, you'll get better. So where is the industry going? What will we look like in 10 years? When I got back into this with the new probiotics and Vital Planet, I started getting out, and my main focus was these independent retailers who are really the core of the natural products industry. I mean, we came from hippies. You know what I mean? We came from hippies. And so now we're looking at all these big companies coming in and gobbling up everything, but there's still the independent retailer out there, and there's plenty of them to even continue the industry to go forward. And the way I look at it is this. I look at the independent retailer as being a boutique industry. Let's take shirts, for example. You used to have, when you wanted to buy your husband a Tommy Bahama shirt, right? You had to go to a Tommy Bahama store. You didn't find them all over the place in every major department store. You had to go to a Tommy Bahama store. Well, once they went into major department stores, what happened to the boutiques? They tried something else. They went to another line of products. And this is what's going to be very important for the independent retailer going forward. And this is what's going to make our industry still be the source of information is still got to come from that independent retailer. And so to keep those guys flourishing, we have to become conscious of going in there and buying products from them and keeping them running, because I see them as still giving people information about their health. And it's going to be very important, because you go into these big stores, they don't have anyone in there to help you. They haven't taken the time to go to a trade show and do classes and all the things that's very important. So in 10 years, I expect to see a boutique industry where you go in and there's specialty supplements. They've done research to bring in supplements that aren't in big box stores. So I think it's going to get better, but currently we're in turmoil a little bit. We're in the transition, but that will change as time goes on. And these independent retailers that hang in there with us are going to end up flourishing.